I'm Brandon Staglin. I'm Chief Advocacy and Engagement Officer for One Mind.
Can you tell me about your own mental health journey?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. So, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia when I was 18 years old, a long time ago. And it was the scariest and most kind of dangerous experience of my life. Basically, when I developed schizophrenia, I'd been experiencing some preliminary signs and warning symptoms. After having worked very hard academically for a number of years throughout high school and my first year of college, when I came home for the summertime after that first year, I was still in a state of kind of stress from the challenging first year, and had just broken up with my first serious girlfriend that freshman year, and was then trying to find a job for the summer. And the stress of not being able to find a job very easily got to me as well. So those factors precipitated for me a lot of stress. And in my mind, I was existentially doubting my worth as a human being. And it came to a point where that summer I was in my parents' home alone, and I didn't have anyone to talk to about these stressful thoughts and feelings that I was having. And that's when it happened, the first psychotic episode that I had had. And it was as if a wall suddenly slammed down on my mind, so to speak. The feeling in my head, it was like all of a sudden something snapped or shifted, and it was like the right half of my awareness had been kind of torn away, and in its place was this dark vortex of swirling dread. And that's why it was so terrifying. I had the delusion that I would have a new entity form inside me if I let any new experiences come into the right half of my awareness. And so laboring under that delusion, I went through the next few days wandering around the community trying to find that half of me which I was convinced that I had lost. And after a run-in with the law, after finally being hospitalized with the help of a friend, my parents came back from the trip they were on and took me home, and I began to see a psychiatrist. That began my mental health journey in a very rocky way, as it probably is for everyone, I would believe, with a serious mental illness. Different from person to person. Everyone's story is unique, but I can't imagine it's ever pleasant to go through a psychotic episode for the first time. So since then, I've gone on to I recovered from the initial episode in about 6 months' time with the help of three major factors. Number one being my family's loving support. The second being getting care early. As I said, I got care within a few days of my first psychotic episode starting. And then thirdly, staying engaged with the community to rebuild a sense of agency and purpose. And so those three factors saw me through the first initial episode, and through a lot of suicidality, a lot of feelings of wanting to die. And once I got through that really difficult time, I was able to go back to college and finish my degrees and go on to become an engineer, which was my lifelong dream at the time, begin building satellites. I learned a lot from my experiences with schizophrenia. I'm happy to expound on those later if that's one of your questions, but I've learned a lot, and so I'm happy to share that as well.
Yes, please.
Okay, sure, thanks. So I've learned values from my experiences with schizophrenia. The first episode that I had, there was a time when I was feeling really depressed and hopeless about the future. I had this sense that I couldn't live much longer safely, so to speak, in the sense that I had this delusion that there were demons waiting to drag me down to hell, rip my soul out of my body and take me to hell. And I hope that's not too scary for your viewers to hear. It was a delusion that I had, and the constant worry and hypervigilance that I experienced due to that thought recurring in my head exhausted me over the course of the first 6 months of my illness. And I thought to myself, well, geez, maybe if I just die on a high note, I could spend the rest of eternity in heaven. And that would be a better outcome than what I'm looking at based on these thoughts that I'm having. And so I was seriously contemplating dying. But then at that moment, I began to think, is there a reason to live for me? And there must be some reason. And that's when it came to me, curiosity. So I had been studying chimpanzees as a volunteer researcher at the local zoo where I lived, and they fascinated me, and I had never seen one perform what they call a dominance display, which in Jane Goodall's books you read about is something that male chimps do to inspire awe and respect from chimps around them. And by extension, I had never seen a lot of things in this world. I was only 18, and so I wanted to grow and live a life of with some adventures in it, and to experience discovery for myself. And so that principle of curiosity and learning, lifelong learning, I learned that from that experience, something that I've held to since then. Other principles include love and compassion. My family was a huge support for me, as I mentioned, during my initial episode, and even my second episode, which took place 6 years later. And they helped me to learn not only about receiving care, which they provided plenty of, but also to give care. Yeah. So there came a time when my grandmother, who was also a huge support for me, my father's mother, during my time of sickness, she got older and was very elderly and was frail. And she really enjoyed spending time with me, and vice versa. There came a time when there was a party my parents were having, and she was there with them, and I almost ditched her at the party, thinking, I just can't handle this. I'm really restless. I can't handle being with my family today. The medication I was taking at the time had that side effect. And my parents, as I was about to leave, she said to me, "Don't you want to spend the day with me?" She seemed hurt, and that really threw me for a loop. I couldn't process that at the moment. I was kind of really wrapped up in my own concerns for myself. And my parents talked to me, and they said, "She wants to be with you today. She needs you." And that hit me hard. I was like, "Oh wow, I mean something to her. I can help her. I can care for her." And so I went back and spent the day with her, and in the years that followed, became a caregiver for her. I took her to dinner every week. I brought her to a new place to live near my family and me. And so the care that I learned from that experience, I apply to my relationships now, and it's really rewarding to not only feel the care that I'm feeling, but also to build relationships that are caring in mutually between me and others. Those are two wonderful lessons that I've learned through my experiences with schizophrenia that I didn't know before I had the illness. So I think even serious mental illness can be a great teacher.
Yeah. So what inspired you to create One Mind?
Yeah, thank you. So One Mind, my family founded One Mind in 1995, inspired by our shared experience with my schizophrenia diagnosis and recovery. One Mind was created on the principle that the treatments that are available for serious mental illness are not good enough. They have too many debilitating side effects, and people don't stay on them very well. I myself went off my medication at one point during my illness and recovery and had a terrible relapse, as so many people unfortunately do. And so we needed better treatments for serious mental illness. And so science was something that was essential to develop those treatments. So we began to support scientists with our nonprofit. And we raised the money to support those scientists through a music festival for brain health, which is something we have done every year since 1995. That first year was a fun event. I participated less then because I was still pretty sick, but got really into it in 2005 when I became a little more able to engage and more stable. But the money we raised through that event, which we host at our vineyard here in Napa Valley every year, is something we applied at the beginning to programs for young scientists to grow their careers, and also mainly to make discoveries that can help develop better treatments for mental illnesses like schizophrenia, like bipolar, like major depression, and beyond. And so we've done that program, the Rising Star Awards is what we call that, since 2005. And that's had that name since 2005. And we've given 43 of those awards over that length of time. Some of those have gone on to become great leaders in science, which I'm really proud of, like Joshua Gordon, who directed the National Institute of Mental Health for about 6 years. He was one of our rising stars in 2010. Many other great scientists like him have come through the One Mind Rising Star Awards program. And it goes way beyond that. Happy to share more about One Mind if you're interested.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. So we have a series of programs that work together in concert to improve treatments and services for mental illness. So basically we have the discovery programs, we have a program in development of better treatments, then we have a program for that interfaces with distribution of better treatments. So discovery, development, distribution. So the discovery program is the Rising Star Awards program that I mentioned. And the second program we run is called the One Mind Accelerator. And what it does is help entrepreneurs who are developing companies and launching them using fundraising to help people with severe mental illness. And we help these companies through giving them mentorship, giving them coaching and community building so they can have relationships from other entities like healthcare systems or enterprise-based companies that could be their partners or their customers. They could then distribute their innovations to people who are, say, those companies' employees or those health systems' patients through that business relationship. And so we grow their network so they can form more of those relationships, as well as growing a community amongst the entrepreneurs that are part of it. So we're really proud of this program. It's so far touched about 300,000 lives over the last 3 years, and it's growing fast. We've so far had 21 companies, startup companies, come through our program, and they've gone on to raise an additional, I believe, $180 million since coming through our program, which is really great for them as well as they grow their influence. Some of the companies that have gone through that program have done things like providing innovative care for severe mental illness based in research. So it fits with our whole model. That program is called, that company is called Ami Health. And other companies are more like science oriented, like research oriented. And so we had one in 2023 called Motif Neurotech, developing a minimally invasive brain implant. It does go actually in the brain, goes on the surface of the skull. So it's a much safer surgery to do, much easier to do. It's almost like an outpatient surgery. And then that implant provides neurostimulation to the brain to address things like severe anxiety or depression. So that company is another thing we're really proud of. And some folks in our community that in fact, John Nelson introduced me to you is part of that company. So it's there's a lot of community building we do throughout all of our programs. Between the Rising Star Awards we offer and the One Mind Accelerator, we connect those programs by enabling the Rising Stars to learn about entrepreneurship from the Accelerator entrepreneurs, so they can grow their impact as scientists by commercializing their discoveries into things people can use. The third major program of One Mind is called the One Mind at Work program. And it helps business leaders to provide welcoming and supportive environments for their employees who face mental health challenges. And I'm really proud of this program as well. We have had about 180 companies join as members, and really making a big impact through those companies as well, to the tune of about 26 million people influenced by that.
Wow, that's amazing.
Thank you. It
And
means a
also-
lot to me to see the progress we've made over the last 30 years as an organization. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary last year. And just knowing that we've touched so many lives brings me a lot of satisfaction and hope for the future. The most meaningful part of the work that I do is working with individuals who are experiencing mental illness themselves. Not only over the last several years, including things like referring people to services if they know about our work in, say, early psychosis research, which is something we focused on for a while, referring them to services that can benefit them, and learning their stories in the process. But now I've launched a new component of One Mind called the One Mind Lived Experience Council, which enables leaders who have experienced severe mental illness to advise our program beneficiaries, like our One Mind Rising Star awardees, like our One Mind Accelerator entrepreneurs, like our One Mind at Work business leaders, on the perspectives of people who experience these conditions, so that those leaders can target their products, their services, their science toward those needs directly, understanding them directly, and so that they'll be much more effective in making an impact in the lives they aim to change.
What is it like being on the Lived Experiences committee?
Thanks. It's really inspiring. I've gotten to work with some amazing people on the council. There are 4 of us currently. Myself, John Nelson, whom you know, a survivor of severe depression who, through the kind of miracle of deep brain stimulation, recovered his life. It changed his ability to interact in the world again, to function. And since then, he's become a powerhouse advocate for pulverizing the stigma, which I believe you had on a previous episode.
Yes.
And another individual, Linnea Johnson, who lives, she identifies as bipolar, using the condition first language. And she is an author and an advocate for workforce mental health, cultural change, and so forth. She's been an amazing advocate as well that I'm privileged to know. I've known for about 15 years. And then Carlos Larari is the 4th. He lives with schizophrenia. He is another amazing individual who co-chaired the steering committee for a huge international research program called the Accelerating Medicines Partnership with Schizophrenia, which I was part of, developing new medications for the early stages of schizophrenia. Now he's in law school. He just finished law school. He's a lawyer, a law clerk, living in California. And I feel very privileged to know all these dedicated people and work with them with their ambitious goals as well to change the mental health system. I do have a theory about how we can change the mental health system, what lever to pull to make it much better. Would you like to hear about that?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I'm kind of leading you from thing to thing. I hope that's okay. My theory is that a big problem with the mental health care system in our society today is that there's way too much distrust and discrimination involved. Yeah. And it goes in multiple directions. So way too many clinicians, way too many administrators, doctors don't understand the experience of severe mental illness directly. As a result, they probably have an unconscious bias against the credibility of people who live with severe mental illness, and may relate to them with kind of a power dynamic, like take this medication, you should be compliant with it in order to get well, do what I say. Certainly not all clinicians and doctors are like that. The ones that I work with I've been forced to work with doctors and clinicians who are very, they listen well, But I've heard from many others that there is unfortunately that kind of relationship for others. The other direction is that there's distrust from people out in the community for the mental health care system, and that's growing. Growing distrust in institutions, in science, and medicine, as it stands today, and I think that's based in historic discrimination, for example, against certain underserved minorities. Also, rural communities don't have universities nearby, and so they may not be as connected with the science or feel like it's a part of their lives. And so I heard a recent survey from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention that said that 65% of people experiencing mental illness don't believe the mental health system can offer them anything worthwhile. So as a result of these factors, I believe. So here's what we need to do. We need to bridge that gap. We need to help the leaders of mental health programs, leaders of our society, understand directly the needs of people and the interests and experiences of people with severe forms of mental illness. And we need to do that by enabling direct contact between those leaders and leaders with lived experience, who can speak on their wavelength. And that's what the ultimate goal of the Lived Experience Council is to bridge that gap and to foster that trust, and thus enable a tighter and more healthy engagement between mental health providers, mental health service users, and help heal people who can benefit from that all throughout our world.
Yeah, that's huge because I live with bipolar disorder too. And the big thing for me, I noticed there's more like doctor or data or scientist focus, but that lived experience focused isn't there. And some of the, those are big issues, but sometimes my issue is just getting up and waking up in bed in the morning. So I would like to talk to other people like that. Do you think lived experience need to be a part of that process?
Yes, absolutely. I think that it's essential, not only because there's a saying, nothing about us without us. So it's essential from a moral and ethical standpoint, but it's also essential from an effectiveness standpoint. If people develop new treatments without understanding the needs of people's lived experience, they won't be targeted at those needs. Like you say, like getting out of bed in the morning is one thing that you want to be able to do more easily. And so maybe the treatments for, say, most treatments for schizophrenia over the past few decades that have been developed have focused on the psychotic symptoms, the hallucinations, the delusions, which, yes, they are scary and terrifying and they can be debilitating, but they're not the most debilitating symptoms. The most debilitating symptoms from my perspective and from research that I've read are the negative and cognitive symptoms of schizophrenia, so things like being unable to feel emotions fully or express them fully in the kind of, with all the vividness that people who don't have schizophrenia usually do. Things like being able to form a rapport easily with other people. It can be hard for people who experience schizophrenia sometimes due to those negative symptoms. And as a result, it's hard for many people who experience severe mental illness to succeed in workplaces, for example, because it's essential to form relationships with people in those workplaces. And so if they're not healthy, good, rapport-based relationships, then the work won't be as easy to do. You might be ostracized, bullied. I've talked to people who have experienced that. So if those symptoms can be addressed through treatments, then people can live healthier, fuller lives and really reclaim the life that they were meant to live. So lived experience is something that has told that science that this is important. And that's an example of why lived experience participation in science and service development is so important.
And talking to you, just hearing how you're a strong business leader and you didn't have your mental illness stop you. My goal is to be a leader in the mental health video and media space. And sometimes I think my bipolar disorder may stop me from being a leader. And I bet you a lot of people with lived experience are afraid that they can't be a leader. What advice would you give people with lived experience if they want to follow your footsteps?
Yeah, thank you. I would suggest two main things. The first being understand that you are enough. That this is some advice given to me by a colleague a while ago, and it was really healthy, good advice. Understand that even though you might feel like an imposter, imposter syndrome is something that so many people experience as a leader. Everybody feels that way to some degree when they're getting started, especially, and everybody's winging it, whether they are experienced or not. Like new situations that come up in leadership roles, just use your best judgment and trust it, even though you may, like for example, when I was serving as president of One Mind for about 6 years, I often would think I couldn't trust my thoughts or my impressions of things because I had experienced psychosis before, and I just had the habit of not trusting my thinking very well. So that hindered me for a while. But learning to trust myself better helped, and learning to rely on others as like reality checks also helps. Like delegate, know your strengths and delegate to those who have strengths that complement yours. So work with people in your milieu, like on your team, hire people, so to speak, hire people who can complement your strengths. And most of all, take care of your mental health while you do this, while you lead. I made the mistake of spending too many weeks and months with too little sleep. And it hindered my ability to relate to people. Like I was cranky, I was not present in meetings as much as I should have been. And I found that when I was getting enough sleep, conversely, relationships are much easier. That's one thing that's really important is sleep. Another thing is doing things in your life that give you a sense of meaning and purpose. So work can be one of those things, but I think there should be others, like hobbies, for example, or relationships that you have, maybe your family, your friends. When I prioritize spending time with my family or spending time playing my guitar, it gave me so much more sense of feeling like a whole human being and be able to relate to other people as whole human beings, coming from a place of like, quote, parity with them in a sense. Like I didn't feel like I was different. Felt like I was at one with the community I was in. And so taking care of your mental health is essential for any leader, I think.
How has telling your story helped your own healing process?
Telling my stories helped my healing process by helping me process the experiences that I've had. I give a great example of that. So not only I did a lot of blogging during the 20 teens when I first became communications director for One Mind, as one of the first things I did for the organization. And then webcasting I did for a while with a webcast called Brainwaves. But the best storytelling that I did was to one individual, not to a broadcast story, not to a broadcast framework. But
Right.
through my work, I made a good friend who has now since passed away. He was an advocate. He was a public figure. His name was Robin Cunningham, and he lived with schizophrenia as well. He developed it in his teens, and when I knew him, he was in his 70s. And I met him through one of One Mind's events. But we became friends over the next couple of years, and we really connected deeply based on our experience and just our sensibility about things. But he'd been a CEO of companies over the years, and he really inspired me to want to do more. But here's the story I'm getting to. There came a time when we were having a conversation over breakfast one day, and I was telling him about something that really debilitated me in my life, and that's the sense that I'd had an experience that I felt really marginalized by. And it's kind of a long story as to how to describe the whole thing, but I found that when I told Robin this story about that experience, and all he had to do was listen appreciatively. He didn't have to say anything. As I told the story, I was able to reframe it in my mind and reframe the narrative and see it from a totally different perspective, like validating the worth of the experience that I had. And so I was able to see that I was a worthy human being and not held back by that experience. And that experience was what I thought that it had been. And I learned from that your experiences are what you define them to be, not what anyone else defines them to be for you. And so that was a hugely helpful thing that telling my story helped me to do.
You touched on it a little bit, but what do you do to help your own mental health?
Yeah, a little bit. The main thing that I do to help my mental health is to spend quality time with my family and friends. My wife and I have a wonderful little puppy named Mizu. We got her back in June of 2024, and so we've had her for about 6 months now. And she is a ball of fire. She's half angel, half Tasmanian devil, and she loves to play and play with us, play with other dogs, and playing with her is really rejuvenating for me. And spending quality time with my wife, not to prioritize one over the other, let's do the dog first. But my wife, I love her very, very deeply, and we've been married for almost 16 years. She's been a great support for me as well, and it means a lot to me to spend quality time with her and Mizu, as well as my birth family, my parents and my sister. We spend a lot of time together. We all live kind of in the same geographic area, so we see each other a lot, and they're all involved in the work of One Mind in one form or another.
What are some of the things you've learned from your wife?
Yeah, so I've learned from her that it's important to be thoughtful about other people. I told the story about caring for my grandmother, and my wife has kind of doubled down on that in terms of the lessons she's taught me. I can be very self-absorbed even now, like not in terms of like caught up in my thoughts, so to speak,
Right.
absent-minded, put
Yeah.
it that way, absent-minded. Thinking about work when I'm at home, unfortunately, sometimes I do that too much, or when I get tired, my mind kind of wanders, and so I'm not always as present as I should be. And so her reminders to be present, to prioritize the needs of our family, prioritize friends who we have and their needs, like thinking about them at holidays, their birthdays, remembering them on their special times. Her reminders to that help me to be more mindful of people around me, and that's been really helpful. I'm really grateful to her for all that she offers me. Yeah.
Where do you want to see your mission in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I hope that we are able to start to transform the mental health system in a meaningful way. It needs it, and it needs the input and the guidance of people with lived experience. And so we aim to grow the council's work. We aim to grow the council's influence not only for our Rising Star awardee scientists and our One Mind Accelerator entrepreneurs and the business leaders of One Mind at Work, but also through over governmental leaders, over leaders throughout our society. And as we grow the council's sphere of influence, I hope that more leaders will take notice and take to heart that message that mental illness is something that is a human phenomenon. It's not anything that others people. It's something that we all have a connection to in one form or another, and it needs to be respected. And the people who live with it need to be accepted and empowered, just like anyone else. Those opportunities should be there for everyone. So I hope we can make meaningful change that way through the work that I'm doing.
How can people reach out and learn more?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can also email me at brandon.staglin@onemind.org. You can learn more about our organization, One Mind, at the website, onemind.org is the domain.